7,000 against 30,000, a ledger so wrong it feels like a joke, and yet the ink dries in French blood and English mud. This should be annihilation. This should be the end. By the end, you'll understand how this happens and why the ground itself turns into a weapon. This isn't a story about brave knights clashing under banners. It's a story about hunger, disease, and a strip of churned earth that kills the idea of chivalry more efficiently than any sword. Here is the spine of it, the question that refuses to die. How does Henry of England, with a sick, shrinking army, walk into the teeth of a larger force and walk out alive? And what does the mud demand in payment? Henry is still young enough that people remember him as the wild prince with wine on his breath, but he wears the crown now, and the crown does not forgive old habits. He learns war the hard way, not from poems, but from the weight of mail on sore shoulders, from the sting of rain under a helmet rim, from the way a camp goes quiet when sickness starts counting men. He keeps 3 sensations close because they never leave him. His lips crack until they split when he speaks too long in dry wind. His lungs burn when fever climbs, and every breath feels like it scrapes him from the inside. His fingers go numb in cold rain, and he hates how quickly a king can drop a sword if his hand forgets it belongs to him. He grows up inside a machine built for conquest. English kings claim France as inheritance and insult, and the claim becomes a blade everyone keeps sharpening. Henry watches the long war between crowns turn into habit. He watches archers become a national obsession, men drilled from boyhood to pull yew and send death in a black swarm. He watches nobles learn that armor is not invincibility, only delay. He watches the church bless campaigns and call it justice. He watches his own father take power through civil bloodshed, and he absorbs the lesson. Legitimacy is something you seize and then defend again and again, or it leaks away. So Henry shapes himself into the kind of man who can hold a room with silence. He prays hard enough that some think it's theater, but he also reads accounts, counts ships, measures food, and asks how many arrows an archer can carry before his shoulders fail. He pushes discipline because he knows what undisciplined men do in foreign towns. He wants the French crown, yes, but he wants something else more dangerous, a story of rightness so strong that even his enemies must repeat it. And when he finally turns his gaze across the channel, he does it with the calm of someone stepping into a storm he has been staring at for years. Miles away, France is not a single will. It is a court split by factions, a kingdom strained by internal conflict, and a king whose illness leaves power in the hands of princes and councils. The French can still raise armies that make the ground tremble, but unity is a fragile thing, and pride is never fragile. Constable Charles d'Albret watches the English preparations with a soldier's cold attention. He is not a fool with a plume. He understands logistics. He understands that an invader must be fed, must be trapped, must be cut off from ports. He also understands the French nobility, their hunger to win glory in the old style, their impatience with caution. He measures this like a commander measures a river, not by its beauty, but by how it drowns men. In England, the War Council gathers before the sails fill. Candlelight wavers over maps, over lists of ships and men. The air smells of wax and damp wool. Henry stands with cracked lips pressed into a line, listening more than speaking at first, letting every voice reveal what it fears. An advisor, the Duke of Exeter, leans in. "Sire, Harfleur is a gate. Take it, and you hold Normandy's throat." Another voice, older, colder, Thomas Erpingham, who knows archers like a shepherd knows sheep, says, "The bow wins when the ground allows it. Choose your ground, or the French choose it for you." A third, Gloucester, young and restless, can't keep still. Why nibble at gates? March for Paris and end it. Henry lets them argue until the arguments start circling. Then he speaks, and the room stills because his lungs burn and he refuses to show it. "We go where we can be supplied." Henry says. "We take what we can hold, and we do not gamble England on a single heroic charge. Is it caution, or is it calculation wearing a crown?" Across the water, D'Albret is miles away, listening to his own council crackle with aristocratic heat. Some want to smash the English at the shore. Others want to starve them, shadow them, let disease do the cutting. D'Albret's mind runs on different tracks at once. Honor, yes, but also arithmetic. If you let an invader take a port, you give him a mouth. If you rush and lose, you give him a legend, he says to his circle, voice level. We do not fight the English where they wish. We let them rot in our land. A noble bristles. Rot, while they insult us with their banners. D'Albret's eyes do not flicker. Let them insult the wind. I want them hungry. Henry sails. He lands. Summer turns toward late season. Steel and wood and cloth pour into France like a wound opening. The first goal is Harfleur, a fortified town near the Seine, a port that can feed an army and anchor the campaign. Henry approaches it with the heavy patience of a man who knows sieges are not glorious. They are slow violence. Before trenches choke the fields, before bodies thicken the air, the ultimatum goes in. Henry sends word to Harfleur. Surrender and be spared. Resist and suffer. It is formal, almost polite, and it carries the cruel certainty of someone who believes God stands behind his seal. Inside Harfleur, fear doesn't look like screaming yet. It looks like men swallowing, like hands tightening on spears, like mothers pulling children away from windows. "Aye?" townsman mutters to another. He speaks mercy like a creditor. On the English side, an archer shifts his weight and watches the walls. "They'll make us pay for every stone," he says. Henry rides forward enough that the defenders can see the gold on his coat, the crown-quiet posture. His numb fingers clamp on the reins. Rain threatens in the distance. He calls up, and his cracked lips pull tight around words. "Open your gates," Henry says, "and save your people." From the battlements, the answer comes back, stubborn and terrified all at once. "We hold for France." So Henry turns away, and the machine begins. The march now is not across miles, but across inches of earth as men dig, carry, build, sweat. Trenches cut the land. Stakes rise. Timber frames for artillery and ladders creak. The approach becomes a living thing, a slow tightening around Harfleur's throat. The smell turns sour as latrines overflow. Henry's lungs burn in the heat and the closeness of too many bodies. His lips split when he speaks orders all day and drinks too little. He wipes blood from them with the back of a glove and refuses to flinch. Pressure builds. The town fires back. Sorties spill out like sudden knives. The English answer with arrows, with stones, with cannon that thunder and shake the ribs. A micro-arc completes itself again and again. A plan forms, meets resistance, demands a decision, and leaves consequences on the ground. One night, a French sortie rushes the English works. Torches flare, men shout in two languages. An English watchman yells, to the trench," and the alarm races like fire. An advisor hurries to Henry, breath ragged. "Sire, they test the line. If they break it, the siege breaks." Henry's fingers are numb, his grip clumsy with cold sweat, but his voice stays steady. "Hold," Henry says. "No panic. Close the gap." The consequence is immediate and ugly. Men die in muddy ditches by torchlight. The siege holds, but the cost is not heroic. It is coughing, bleeding, exhaustion. Disease arrives like a second enemy, silent and relentless. Dysentery spreads. The camp's confidence thins. Henry breathes and his lungs burn, and he wonders, not in public, but in the tight dark behind his eyes. How does he keep an army together when the enemy is also inside their guts? Miles away, D'Albret hears reports. The English dig, the English cough. Harfleur resists. He smiles without joy. He tells his men, "Let the town hold. Let sickness fight for us. Is that cruelty, or is it the least bloody option he can see? The first major confrontation does not come as a single clash of cavalry. It comes as the siege grinding to its conclusion. Harfleur's walls are battered. Its people are starving. Its leaders weigh pride against survival until the scales crack. Finally, Harfleur yields. Terms are negotiated. Henry takes the town. He enters not as a ravening beast, but as a conqueror who wants the port intact and the story controlled. A civilian in Harfleur spits into the dirt as Englishmen march past. "So that is mercy," he whispers. An English soldier, hollow-eyed from sickness, answers without malice, "Mercy is living through it." Henry stands inside the captured town and victory tastes like rot. His army is smaller now. Disease has eaten men faster than arrows. He can hold Harfleur, but he cannot ignore the calendar. Winter crawls closer. Supplies strain. French forces gather. Here the spine question tightens again. How does Henry, already bleeding strength, face what comes next without being crushed? His council meets again, this time with the smell of Harfleur's damp stone and the ocean's breath in the air. Some urge retreat. Some urge a bold strike. Henry's cracked lips make him look older than he is. His lungs burn every time he climbs stairs. His fingers go numb when the wind cuts through alleys. Erpingham says, "Sire, we can go home with a port and honor." Gloucester snaps, "Home? After this? We came for France, not a harbor." Exeter looks at Henry carefully. "If you march, you must march fast. The French will not let you stroll." Henry's decision is a gamble shaped like discipline. He chooses to march toward Calais, an English-held port, to prove he can move through France and still live, to raid, to draw the French into a fight on terms not entirely theirs. It is not Paris, it is not surrender, it is a statement. Henry says, quiet enough that only his closest hear, "We march, and we march as if the road itself listens." So the march begins, and the land becomes an active pressure. Rain starts to fall, fields turn heavy, roads slick, boots sink, wheels groan. The army moves like a wounded animal, stubborn, limping, dangerous. Henry rides with them. His numb fingers cling to leather. His lungs burn when he breathes damp, cold air. His lips crack again when he speaks too long in wind. A common archer mutters, half prayer, half complaint, "St. George, keep my bowstring dry." Another answers, "Keep my belly full, and I'll keep the French honest." They laugh, but it's thin laughter. Hunger is not funny. French forces shadow them, not always seen, but felt like eyes in trees. Villages close their doors. The English take what they can and pay when they must, because Henry knows looting breeds hatred that turns into knives. Miles away, Dalbret's preparations tighten like a noose. He calls in nobles, knights, men-at-arms. He knows numbers matter, but he also knows terrain matters more. He wants Henry trapped away from Harfleur, away from ships. He wants to block crossings over the Somme and force the English into bad ground or starvation. And he fights not only the English, but the impatience of his own class. The hot-blooded lord demands a battle now. "We outnumber him, crush him," Dalbret replies. "Outnumbering is not a spell. We crush him when he cannot run." Another advisor, Marshal Isle, "Boucicaut, Sads, let him sweat for every mile." Dalbret nods. "Yes, make the road his enemy." How does Henry answer an enemy who refuses to give him the clean fight knights dream about? He keeps moving. He searches for crossings. He feints. He listens to scouts. The English find French forces guarding river points, and each blocked ford is a new micro-arc, a route planned, pressure applied, a decision made, a consequence paid in time and hunger. At one crossing, a scout rides in, rain slicking his face. "Sire, the ford is held, stakes in the bank, men ready." Henry's lips split when he grimaces. He tastes blood. Then we do not go there, Henry says. We find another. An advisor protests. Every mile bleeds us. Henry's fingers are numb on the reins. He answers anyway. Every mile also bleeds their patience. Days grind. The English finally cross the Somme at a place the French do not expect, a hard-earned slip through tightening fingers. It is not magic. It is desperation with discipline. The march goes on, and the French finally mass ahead, near a village called Agincourt, a name that will become a knife in memory. Morning arrives under low sky. Rain has fallen. The fields are plowed, soaked, churned. 2 woods flank the open strip of ground, narrowing it like a corridor. Henry looks at it and feels the ground's hunger. Mud clings to boots already, thick and sucking. He understands in a single breath what this place offers him. Not a fair fight, a funnel, a trap made of earth. Now the spine question sharpens again. How does Henry turn sickness and small numbers into survival when France brings an army that can swallow him? Miles away, D'Albret is not truly far now. He stands with the French host, and he sees the English line, smaller, quieter, planted between woods. He sees stakes, and he knows what they mean. He knows arrows. He also sees his own nobles shining with armor, restless, convinced that courage is armor enough. His problem is not only beating Henry, it is preventing victory from becoming chaos. A French common soldier whispers, staring at the English, "They look like ghosts in the mist." Another says, "Ghosts still die." The French leaders argue. Some want to wait, starve the English, force surrender. Some want to attack and end it. Pride pushes like a hand at the back. D'Albret speaks, voice cutting through. "We strike, but we strike with order. The ground is treacherous." A noble scoffs. "Mud? We are France. We ride through worse." D'Albret's jaw tightens. Mud does not respect lineage. Henry prepares his own trap, and it is not cleverness alone. It is acceptance. He orders stakes hammered in front of the archers, angled like teeth. He compresses his men, making the line tight, making sure the woods protect the flanks. He prays. He speaks to his men, not with poetry, but with the raw promise of shared danger. An English soldier near the front mutters, "They have more lances than we have breaths." Another answers, "Then we spend their breaths first." Henry's lungs burn as he walks the line. Cold, damp air cuts him. His fingers are numb, but he forces them to flex. His lips crack when he speaks, and the men see blood and believe it means he shares their suffering. Henry says, "Stand with me. Let them come." That is not a slogan. It is a command shaped like faith. The first clash at Agincourt begins not with thunderous cavalry glory, but with a decision that feels like insanity. Henry advances his line forward, closer, forcing the French to react, narrowing time, denying them the luxury of waiting. It is a risk. If he misjudges distance, he dies. But if he stays, he starves. An advisor hisses, alarmed, "Sire, you move too far." Henry's eyes stay on the corridor of the mud. "If we wait, we wither," Henry says. "If we move, we choose the moment." The consequence comes fast. English archers loose. Arrows rise and fall like black rain. They rattle on armor. They find gaps. They strike horses, faces, joints. Frenchmen shout. Horses rear. The French feel insulted more than injured at first, and insult turns into forward motion. Now the trap reveals itself, mind versus mind, ground versus pride. The French charge, and the corridor between the woods becomes a funnel for thousands of armored bodies. The field, soaked and plowed, grips their feet. Armor that is meant to make them invincible becomes a weight that drags them down. Men stumble, horses slip, lines compress. The second line pushes the first, the third presses behind. The French strength turns into crowding pressure, and crowding becomes suffocation. Miles away is no longer possible now, but the parallel cutting remains in spirit. Even as French knights fight, d'Albret fights his own battle in his head, trying to keep formation, trying to keep control, watching the English archers keep shooting, watching the mud turn strategy into panic. D'Albret shouts to his commanders, "Hold the line, do not bunch." His voice has urgency now, not arrogance. A commander yells back, "They cannot hear, they cannot move." A French noble roars, "Forward, forward," as if shouting can make mud polite. Henry sees the French begin to choke on their own numbers, and his spine question echoes again in a new form. Is this where the larger force defeats itself? And can he endure the moment when the trap becomes a slaughterhouse of exhaustion? The melee slams together. English men-at-arms, fewer, step into the press. They fight close, where arrows can't help as much. Henry fights too. Kings in this era do not hide safely behind lines, not if they want legends that hold. Henry's numb fingers clamp around his weapon. His lungs burn and he tastes iron in his mouth, blood from cracked lips, and he refuses to let his breath turn ragged where men can hear. A common soldier near Henry gasps, "Sire, the press is crushing us." Henry answers, sharp and immediate, "Then we do not break, we bite." His voice is a blade. The French keep coming, but the corridor keeps narrowing. Men fall and cannot rise because bodies press over them. Not gore, not spectacle, but brutal physics. Weight, breath, mud. Knights who dream of single combat find they cannot even lift an arm fully. Chivalry requires space. Agincourt denies space. A French soldier, face smeared with mud, cries, "I cannot move," and fear makes his voice high. Another snarls, "Then die standing." And it is not courage, it is terror pretending. Henry's advisors are shouting, trying to keep the English line from being swallowed by sheer mass. Exeter yells, "Archers, to the flanks, shoot into the press." Erpingham bellows, "Stakes hold, hold the stakes." The archers, once their arrows thin, pick up mallets, knives, whatever they have, and they move like men who know there is no rescue coming if they fail. They strike where armor is weakest. They pull men down. They do not fight like knights. They fight like survival. D'Albret sees the disaster forming, and he speaks again, this time to the nobles whose pride burns brighter than reason. "Fall back and reform," D'Albret shouts. "You cannot win trapped in mud." A noble spits, "Reform before peasants with bows?" D'Albret's eyes flash. "Before death," he snaps. But command cannot reverse momentum when thousands are already committed, already pushing forward because stopping feels like shame. The French force continues to feed itself into the corridor, and Henry's trap keeps collecting bodies and panic. Now the breaking point arrives, the final stand inside the stand, when the English line threatens to buckle under the weight of armored men pressing in. Henry is nearly engulfed. He fights in a knot of bodies, his breath burning, his fingers numb, his lips cracked, and the world shrinks to the scrape of metal and the sucking sound of boots being torn free of mud. Someone near Henry shouts, "They are on the king." An English soldier snarls back, "Then we die round him." Henry hears it, and for a heartbeat he sees his own death as a simple possibility, not tragic, just factual. If he falls here, the story ends differently. England's gamble collapses. France's pride is satisfied. The spine question becomes a corpse. So Henry forces himself forward, and his voice cuts through the chaos. "Close in," Henry commands. "No gaps." The consequence is a terrible intimacy. English men compress, shoulder to shoulder, absorbing impact. They push back with short, brutal motions. They survive because they do not chase glory. They hold. The French, weighed down, cannot recover once they stumble. The mud makes every recovery a labor. Then comes the moment that haunts historians and still sparks argument, the order regarding prisoners. The English take many French nobles alive because ransoms are fortunes. But in the middle of the Fai's battle, alarms flare that the English fear a renewed attack, fear being overwhelmed, fear prisoners rising behind them. Henry makes a decision under pressure that darkens the victory's edge. An advisor protests. "Sire, the prisoners are valuable." Henry's cracked lips draw tight. His lungs burn as he answers. "If we die, they are worth nothing." It is cold. It is desperate. It is a king choosing survival over profit, and the cost is human. Historians debate details, argue scale, argue motives, and some accounts differ, but the shadow of it remains. Victory is not clean. It never is. Miles away is meaningless now because everything is close enough to smell, but D'Albret still has his own battlefield of decisions. He tries to commit later lines, tries to salvage the day. He says, through clenched teeth, "Send them in order, not as a wave, in order." Yet order is already drowned in mud and pride. The French finally break, not in a single dramatic collapse, but in fractures. A retreat here, a panic there, a noble pulled from his horse, a banner falling into mud. The corridor that was supposed to be a stage for French grandeur becomes a channel for French defeat. And Henry, with fewer men than he started with, stands where he should not be standing. So the spine question returns again, quieter now, almost stunned. How does Henry survive this, and what does survival turn him into? The fighting ebbs. The field is a ruin of churned earth, scattered weapons, broken pride. Rain hangs in the air like a memory. Men breathe hard, and the sound of breathing becomes the loudest thing. Henry's lungs burn with every inhale. His fingers, still numb, fumble at his helmet strap. His lips sting where they've split. He looks around, and the scale of it doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like waking from a nightmare and finding the room is still on fire. An English archer, mud to his knees, says to no one, "We are alive." How? His voice cracks on the word alive. A French survivor, staring at the ground, whispers, "This was not a battle. This was a swallowing." Henry orders prayers. Some accounts say the English sing. Whether every man sings or only a few, the impulse is the same, to give meaning to the impossible, to make the body's shaking feel like purpose. In the aftermath, they count. They always count. Numbers are crude, but humans cling to them. French losses are heavy, especially among the nobility. English losses are far smaller by comparison, though not nothing, and the sick and wounded still die after victory, because disease does not sign treaties. The mud holds a different tally, one that does not care which side wins. Miles away again in the halls of France, the defeat lands like a hammer. It changes politics, it weakens factions, it strengthens Henry's negotiating position, it opens doors that had been locked. Yet it does not end the war, it shifts it, it poisons it with new bitterness. It creates a legend that France must live under and England must live up to. Henry himself does not leave Agincourt as a man freed by victory. He leaves as a man bound to it. He must turn this day into leverage, into treaties, into claims. He must keep marching. He must keep surviving. The cracked lips heal and split again. The burning lungs recover and burn again. The numb fingers warm and go numb again. The sensations become a rhythm of kingship. So what does Agincourt do to chivalry? It does not erase bravery. It does not erase noble courage. But it exposes a truth knights do not want to hear. Valor cannot negotiate with physics. A world built on the image of armored men deciding fate through honorable charges meets a strip of wet earth and loses. The bow, the stake, the corridor between woods, the hunger, the discipline, the mud, they all conspire to prove that war belongs to whoever understands reality, not whoever recites ideals. Now the opening paradox returns, but it looks different. 7,000 against 30,000 is not just a miracle. It is a warning. It shows how an army can defeat itself if pride drives it into a trap. It shows how a king can win by refusing the kind of victory his enemies crave. And here is the twist that stings. This triumph that should secure Henry's greatness also plants seeds of harsher war and deeper resentment. The legend hardens identities. The conflict stretches onward. The mud that kills chivalry also feeds a century of vengeance. So answer it, honestly, for yourself. If the ground can kill an ideal, what else can it kill when leaders refuse to listen? If you want more cinematic history stories like this, like the video, subscribe and share what you think really killed chivalry at Agincourt. The arrows or the mud or the pride that refuses to bend. And in the silence after the shouting fades, remember the smallest, haunting sound on that field. Not a trumpet, not a cheer, but the slow, sucking pull of a boot tearing free from the earth.